My name is Nate Calloway. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a police officer in Harlan, Kentucky for going on 11 years. I know this town the way you know a house you grew up in. Every creak in the floor, every draft that comes through the window you never fixed, every neighbor whose light goes on at 3 in the morning and what it means when it does. I'm good at this job. I want to say that plainly, not as a boast, but as a fact. The way you state facts about yourself when you're about to tell a story that complicates them. I'm patient. I'm fair. I follow the rules because I've seen what happens when people in my position decide the rules are optional. And I've made a decision a long time ago that I'm not going to be that kind of officer. I'm telling you this so you understand what it meant. When everything I thought I knew about how to do my job stopped making sense over the course of 3 weeks in February. It started with a tube of lip balm. Harmon's Grocery on Main Street, a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray February day that makes the whole town look like it's been photographed in black and white. Dispatch sent me over for a shoplifting call. The manager, a man named Gerald, who I've known since high school, and who takes these things personally in a way that's always struck me as disproportionate, was holding a woman by the cereal aisle. She was small. That was the first thing I noticed. Not short exactly, but compact, like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Kiesel Sachla, Yeshel Gozlu, a jacket that was too thin for February. She had her arms crossed over her chest, and she was looking at Gerald with an expression that was somewhere between exhausted and defiant, the specific combination I've learned to recognize in people who are past the point of pretending things are fine. The stolen item was a tube of Chapstick, $2.49. Gerald wanted her charged. I looked at the woman, then at the Chapstick, then at Gerald. "I'll handle it," I said. I walked her outside. The cold hit us both, and she pulled the thin jacket tighter and didn't complain about it, which told me something. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I said. She looked at me for a second. Something moved across her face, not calculation, more like she was deciding whether I was worth the truth. "I needed it," she said. My lips were cracked. "It sounds stupid." "It doesn't sound stupid," I said. "Are you arresting me?" I looked at her for a long moment. $2.49. A February that had been running about 15 degrees below average. A jacket that wasn't doing the work it needed to do. "You got somewhere to be?" I asked. "Yes," she said, which I noted was not the same as answering the question I'd actually asked. I let her go with a warning. I paid Gerald for the Chapstick out of my own pocket, which he accepted with the grace of a man who is never fully satisfied, and I drove back to the station thinking about a jacket too thin for February, and a pair of eyes that had been working very hard to look like they weren't asking for anything. The second time was 8 days later. A call came in from the night dispatcher at 11:40, someone sleeping in the bus shelter on Crane Street. February in Harlan, 11 at night, 23 degrees. I took it personally instead of radioing it to whoever was closest, which in hindsight tells me something about where my head already was. She was sitting on the metal bench with a child. A small boy, couldn't have been more than 6, bundled in a coat that was the right weight for the weather in a way that hers wasn't, like she'd made sure he was covered before she thought about herself. He was asleep against her side with his face tucked into her jacket, and she had one arm around him and the other pressed flat against the metal bench, and she was awake and watching me come across the parking lot, with the look of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this, and had already decided how to handle it. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice low because of the kid, "you can't sleep here." "I know," she said. She said it without attitude, just fact. "It's 23 degrees. "I know that too." I looked at the boy, at the way she was positioned around him, not just beside him, but angled, like a windbreak, taking the cold on the side that faced the street so he got the warmer side against the shelter wall. "What's his name?" I said. Something shifted in her face. A different kind of guard went up, Not the tired defiance from the grocery store, but something sharper. Protective. "Jake," she said, "and you're his guardian, legal guardian. Everything's in order." She said it fast, practiced, the way you say something you've had to say many times to people who didn't believe it. "I believe you," I said. She blinked, like that wasn't what she'd expected. I called it in as a welfare check rather than a vagrancy situation, which is a distinction that matters in terms of paperwork and in terms of how a person gets treated in the system afterward. I got them both into the patrol car because it was 23 degrees and the kid was asleep and I wasn't going to leave them in a bus shelter. I drove them to the shelter on 4th Street and made sure they had beds, which on a Tuesday night in February, they did. Barely. Before she got out of the car, she said, "Thank you." I said, "It's my job." She looked at me for a second like she was going to say something else. Then she didn't. She got out, lifted Jake carefully against her shoulder without waking him, and went inside. I sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes after the door closed before I drove away. The third time was 11 days after that. An illegal fire in Riverside Park. Somebody had built a small campfire in the picnic area, which was against city ordinance between November and March. The call came in at 8 in the evening from a jogger who'd spotted it. I already knew, before I turned the corner on the park path and saw the fire, who I was going to find. She'd built it well, I'll give her that. Contained, small, not close to anything that could spread. A ring of stones she must have spent some time arranging. Jake was sitting cross-legged in front of it with a stick, doing the thing kids do with fires, poking, adjusting, completely absorbed. He had a hot dog on the end of the stick, which meant she'd planned this, had brought food, had thought about it as something other than just warmth. She looked up when she heard me coming, and she did something I hadn't expected. She smiled, not a big smile, small, tired, and completely without surprise. "I figured it would be you," she said. I stopped at the edge of the firelight, looked at Jake, who had registered my presence with a glance, and then gone back to the hot dog with the prioritization of someone who understands that dinner is dinner, regardless of circumstances. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I said. Same question as the grocery store, same careful voice. She looked at the fire for a moment. "I did it on purpose," she said. "The fire. All of it." She looked up at me. "The chapstick, the bus shelter, this." The green eyes were steadier than I'd seen them in either of the previous 2 encounters, like she'd made a decision, and the decision had settled something in her. The shelter was full last night, and the night before. There are only 11 beds for women with children, and there are more than 11 women with children in this town in February, and it's going to be 18 degrees tonight. I stood very still. "Jake has a cold," she said. "It's not bad, but it's not nothing either, and I can't—" She stopped, pressed her mouth together. "I've been trying to figure out the legal way to do this, the right way. The way that doesn't end with him being taken away from me, because his guardian got arrested. I've been trying for 3 weeks, and I'm out of options and I'm out of time." She looked at me directly. "So I did the thing that gets us into a warm building for at least 1 night. I'm sorry I keep making your job harder. I genuinely am." Jake looked up from the hot dog. He'd been listening the whole time, in the particular way children listen when they're pretending not to. "Are you the same policeman as before?" he said. "I am," I said. He considered this. "You have a nice car," he said. It was warm. I looked at Mara. She was looking at Jake with an expression that was equal parts love, and the specific exhaustion of someone who's been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and is not sure how much longer their arms are going to hold. "Please don't take him from me," she said, quietly, not begging. She'd said it the way you say something you mean completely and have run out of ways to protect. "I'm trying. I swear to God I'm trying every single day. I looked at the fire, at the ring of stones she'd placed carefully, at Jake's hot dog, which was now slightly too charred on one side because he'd stopped paying attention to it. How long? I said. 3 weeks since we got to Harlan. 6 weeks since I got custody. My brother, she stopped. He can't take care of Jake anymore. I'm all he has. She said it simply, without asking for pity, which made it land harder than if she had. I put out the fire. I did it properly. Water from the bottle in my patrol kit, making sure the stones were cool. And then I sat down on the picnic table across from them and took out my phone and called Donna Marsh, who runs the county's emergency family housing program, and who I have known for 12 years, and who picks up her cell phone at 8 in the evening, because that's the kind of person she is. It took 20 minutes and 2 more calls. But by 8:45, Mara Quinn and Jake had a placement at a transitional housing unit on the east side. A real room, a kitchen they could use, a 30-day hold while the longer-term paperwork went through. I drove them there myself. Jake fell asleep in the back seat within 4 minutes, the way children do when they've finally been given permission to stop being alert. Mara sat in the front and looked out the window at Harlan going by in the dark, and she didn't say anything for most of the drive, which I understood. "Why are you doing this?" she said, when we were about 2 blocks out. "Doing what?" "The calls, driving us. This isn't—" She paused. "This isn't a traffic stop." "No," I said, "it isn't." "So why?" I thought about it. About the Chapstick and the bus shelter and the ring of stones around a fire built by someone who was doing their absolute best in a situation that their best wasn't quite sufficient for. "Because you were asking for help," I said. "You just had to do it in a language I could legally respond to." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she looked back out the window. "I didn't think anyone was going to notice," she said. "I noticed," I said. "I want to tell you the next part of this went smoothly, that the housing worked out and the paperwork cleared and Mara got a job and Jake started school, and everything sorted itself into something neat and manageable. But that's not what happened, because things that have been broken for a long time don't unbreak on a Tuesday night in February just because somebody made a few phone calls. What actually happened was messier and slower and more real than that. The housing placement held for 30 days, which was what it was supposed to do. During those 30 days, I drove by the building on East Crane twice a week, which was not a thing I was required to do, and which I told myself was a general welfare check on a vulnerable family unit, which was true but also not the whole truth. Donna Marsh, who notices everything, mentioned it to me on a Thursday morning at the coffee machine in the county building. "You've been checking in on the Quinn placement," she said. "Welfare check," I said. Donna has a look she gives people when she thinks they're being imprecise about something. She gave it to me. "She's going to need help with the permanent placement application," Donna said. "It's a lot of paperwork, complicated if you don't know the system." "I know the system," I said. "I know you do," Donna said, and went back to her coffee. I brought the paperwork to Mara on a Saturday morning. Jake answered the door in pajamas with a piece of toast in his hand and looked at me with the recognition of someone filing a new data point into an existing category. "You're the policeman," he said. "I am," I said. "You're not in your uniform," he said. "It's Saturday." He considered this. "Do policemen have Saturdays?" "Some of us." He stepped aside to let me in, which I took as the invitation it apparently was. Mara came out of the small kitchen with a dish towel and an expression that landed somewhere between surprised and not surprised. "You didn't have to," she started. "I know the system," I said. "Donna thought it might help." She looked at me for a second, then at Jake, who had gone back to his toast and was now examining it for something. "Okay," she said. "Coffee?" We spent 3 hours at the kitchen table. I know county paperwork the way I know the town, Every line, every box that will bounce an application if it's filled in wrong, every supporting document that sounds optional but isn't. Mara was sharp, I'll tell you that. She asked the right questions. She caught 3 things I'd missed on a form I've filled out a dozen times, which surprised me, and which I told her. And she looked at the table when I said it like she wasn't used to being told she'd done something right. Jake appeared periodically to report on developments in the backyard, which apparently included a very interesting bird situation that required adult awareness. We were both appropriately concerned. At some point around noon, he climbed up into the chair beside me and announced that he was helping, and proceeded to help by coloring on a piece of paper next to the forms with full concentration, providing what I can only describe as moral support through art. "He likes you," Mara said, when Jake had gone to get more crayons. "Kids either do or they don't," I said. "He seems like a good judge." "He is." She said it quietly. "He's been through a lot for 6 years old. It makes him careful about people. He doesn't warm up to everyone." "What happened?" I said. "If you don't mind." She looked at the table. "My brother, he's not a bad person. He just couldn't hold it together. Drugs, then the drugs' consequences, then the consequences. Jake was with him for 3 years before the state got involved." She turned her coffee mug in her hands. "I was in Lexington. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. By the time I knew, it was already a removal situation, and I was the only family member who could pass the background check." She paused. "I didn't hesitate. I want to be clear about that. I didn't hesitate for 1 second." "I know," I said, and I did. "But I also wasn't prepared," she said. "I had an apartment lease I couldn't break and a job I had to quit in 3 weeks to figure out how to become somebody's parent." She almost laughed, a small, hard sound. "I picked Harlan because it was halfway between where I was and where my brother is in the treatment facility. So Jake can see him. He loves his dad. He should get to love his dad." I thought about that for a moment. About the specificity of that decision, picking a town on a map based on a midpoint calculation so a 6-year-old could keep loving his father. "That's a good reason," I said. "It didn't leave a lot of room for logistics," she said. "No," I agreed. "It didn't." Jake came back with the crayons and the conversation shifted, the way conversations do when children re-enter them, and we spent the rest of the afternoon on the paperwork and the bird situation and a discussion about whether policemen were allowed to eat grilled cheese, which Jake had decided to make himself under Mara's supervision, with the seriousness of someone attempting surgery. They were. The answer was yes. The permanent placement came through in April. A small house on Birch Street, 2 bedrooms, a backyard with a fence. The fence mattered because Jake had developed strong opinions about outdoor space. The rent was within the housing assistance parameters. The school district was good. Donna called me when the paperwork cleared with the particular satisfaction of someone whose professional work has produced the correct outcome. I drove by Birch Street that evening. Not a welfare check. I wasn't going to tell myself it was a welfare check. I didn't stop. I just drove by and noted that the lights were on and there was a bicycle on the front porch that hadn't been there the last time I'd passed, which meant Jake had a bicycle, which meant some things were starting to be fine. I stopped 2 days later, a Saturday again. I had no particular reason except that I was in the neighborhood, which was slightly less true than it sounded. Jake answered the door again. He'd gotten a haircut since the last time I'd seen him, and he'd acquired the bicycle, which he informed me immediately was red and had a bell, and could I come see it. The backyard was small but exactly the right size for a 6-year-old with a bicycle, which Jake demonstrated at length while Mara stood on the back steps with coffee and watched him with the particular expression of someone who is, for the first time in a while, able to watch instead of brace. "He's happy," I said. "He's getting there," she said. "There's a difference, but yeah, he's getting there." I stood beside her on the steps and watched Jake circle the yard and ring the bell with the dedication of someone who has been given something they'd privately stopped hoping for and intends to use it as much as possible. "You were good at hiding how bad it was," I said. "I wasn't hiding it," she said. "I just wasn't advertising it. There's a difference there too." "Fair enough." She looked sideways at me. The green eyes in the April light were different from the February ones. Same eyes, different season, different weight behind them. "Why do you keep coming by?" she said. Direct, the way she said most things. No heat in it. Just the actual question. I watched Jake ring the bell at the far end of the yard. "Because I noticed," I said. "And then I couldn't stop." She was quiet for a moment. Jake rang the bell again. "I got a job," she said, "at the county library, 3 days a week to start. It's not much, but it's something." "That's good," I said. "Jake starts first grade in September." "That's good too." "I'm trying to learn how to ask for things," she said, "before I get desperate enough to commit a misdemeanor." I looked at her. She was looking at the yard, a small smile at the corner of her mouth. That was the first one I'd seen that had nothing tired in it. "How's that going?" I said. "I'm working on it," she said. "It's harder than it sounds." "Most things worth doing are," I said. She turned to look at me fully then, and I held the look, which was not difficult, because there was nothing in that look that I wanted to look away from. "Nate," she said. "Yeah. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to know it's the first time I've asked for something without it being an emergency." "Okay." "Would you want to have dinner with us sometime?" she said. "Jake's been asking, and I've been—" She paused. "I've been wanting to. For a while." Jake chose that exact moment to ring the bell 3 times in rapid succession from across the yard, as if punctuating a sentence he'd somehow heard from 30 feet away. "Yeah," I said. "I would." Dinner happened the following Friday. Jake made the seating arrangements, which placed me directly across from him, so that the maximum amount of information could be efficiently exchanged. He had questions, many of them. I answered every one, including the ones about whether police cars had cup holders. They do, I confirmed, too, and what the most interesting crime I'd ever solved was, which required some discretion given the audience, but which I managed. Mara made pasta and apologized for it being simple, and I told her simple was good and meant it. She'd put candles on the table, which she mentioned was because the overhead light was too harsh, and not for any other reason, and I said of course, and Jake said the candles made it look like a restaurant, which he delivered as a compliment. After dinner, Jake showed me his bookshelf, which was organized in a system only he fully understood. Then he showed me the window in his room that had a view of the neighbor's cat, which visited the fence most evenings. Then he told me, with the careful gravity of someone issuing a formal statement, that he was glad I hadn't taken them anywhere when I found the fire. "I was cold," he said, "but Mara makes good fires." "She does," I said. "She's good at most things," he said, in the tone of someone who has conducted an evaluation and is sharing the results. "She didn't used to think so, but she's getting better at knowing it." I looked across the hallway to where Mara was doing dishes and not quite not listening. "I think so too," I said. Jake nodded, satisfied, and went back to explaining the bookshelf system. By June, Jake had a best friend named Cooper from next door who shared his exact opinion about the bell on the bicycle, which was that it should be rung as often as possible, and that any adult who suggested otherwise was operating from incorrect information. They rode in circles in the backyard most evenings after dinner, ringing the bell in tandem, while Mara and I sat on the back steps and tried to have conversations in the brief intervals when the bell wasn't going. "Cooper's mom asked about you," Mara said one evening, after a particularly sustained bell sequence. "What about me?" "She asked if you were Jake's uncle or his stepdad." She said it to the yard, not to me. testing the weight of the words in the air before deciding what to do with them. What did you tell her? I told her you were a friend. A pause. She said you didn't look like a friend. What does a friend look like? She looked at me sideways. Apparently, not like that. I watched Jake and Cooper complete another lap. The bell rang 4 times in quick succession. 2 6-year-olds who had found each other in a backyard and made a friendship out of a shared conviction about bells. Mara, I said. Yeah. What do you want to tell her next time? She was quiet for a moment. The bell rang twice. Jake shouted something to Cooper about an upcoming turn. Something true, she said finally. I looked at her. She looked at me. The evening light was doing what it did in June in Harlan. Long and golden and entirely unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. Okay, I said. She reached over and put her hand on top of mine on the porch step, the way she did things, simply, without announcement, like it was just the obvious next thing, and I turned my hand over and held it. Jake rang the bell. The thing about Harlan is that everybody knows everybody, which means that by July, most of the town had formed an opinion about the police officer who'd arrested the same woman 3 times and then ended up at her dinner table every Friday. The opinions ranged from romantic to suspicious to deeply entertained, depending on who was holding them, and Mara received them with the particular equanimity of someone who has learned not to spend energy on things she can't change. My sergeant, a man named Dale, who has been doing this job for 28 years and who I deeply respect, called me into his office on a Tuesday morning and closed the door. The Quinn woman, he said. Yes, I said. You're seeing her. I am. He looked at me for a long moment over the top of his reading glasses in the way he looks at things when he's deciding what he actually thinks about them. She a good person? He said. One of the best I've met, I said. And I've met a lot of people in this job. He nodded slowly. The boy doing okay? He starts first grade in September. He has a bicycle with a bell. He's doing well. Dale turned his pen over in his hands twice. You were the arresting officer 3 times. Technically. There's a way to read that situation that looks complicated from a departmental standpoint. I know, I said. And there's a way to read it that looks like a man who did his job the way it's supposed to be done, he said, which is seeing what's actually in front of you instead of just what's on the report. I didn't say anything. Dale is not a man who needs responses to every sentence. I'm going to document this as a community welfare case that led to a positive outcome, he said, which is what it is. He picked up his pen. Tell the woman and the boy I said hello. I will, I said, and Calloway. He didn't look up from whatever he'd started writing. Stop driving past their house on shift. Drive past it on your own time. It'll be cleaner for everyone. Yes, sir, I said. He almost smiled. Almost. Mara got a 2nd day at the library in August, then a 3rd in September, when Jake started school and she had more reliable hours. By October, she was full-time, which she told me over the phone on a Tuesday evening in the specific tone of someone who is pleased, but hasn't fully decided yet how much they're allowed to show it. That's good, I said. That's really good. It's a good job, she said. People bring children in and let them pick books, and the children are very serious about it. Jake came in yesterday and spent 40 minutes picking 1 book, and then checked out 7. Checks out, I said. She laughed, the real kind, quick and genuine. Nate, she said. Yeah. Thank you. For the paperwork, and the calls, and the driving, and all of it. A pause. I don't think I ever said it plainly. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I want to. I've been practicing asking for things and saying what I mean. It's a whole program. Another pause, shorter. Thank you. You changed what this year looked like for us. I thought about February, about a ring of stones around a fire in a park, about the specific way she'd looked at me when she said I did it on purpose. Not shame, not apology, just truth, plain and full, handed over to whatever came next. "You did that," I said. I just responded. "You responded right," she said. I sat with that for a second. "Mara," I said. "Yeah. I'd like to keep responding right if that's okay with you. For a long time." The line was quiet. I heard Jake in the background asking about something. The word waffles was involved, which told me dinner negotiations were underway. "Yeah," she said, quietly, simply, the same way she said everything that was true. "I'd like that. I'm telling you this because people ask me sometimes. When they find out how we met, when Mara tells the story at the part where she admits out loud that she committed 3 misdemeanors on purpose to access a heated building, people ask what I was thinking. What made me stop and look instead of just process and move on? I don't have a clean answer. I'm a man who follows rules. I believe in them. I think structure is what keeps people safe, including people who are in the kind of trouble that doesn't look like trouble from the outside. But I also know that a rule only does what the person applying it decides it does. And I know that a woman building a careful ring of stones around a small fire in a February park, angled to keep the cold off a 6-year-old with a hot dog on a stick, is not the same thing as a problem to be processed. She was asking for help the only way she knew how to ask. She'd been asking for 3 weeks, and the only thing that was required of me was to be the kind of person who speaks that language. I'd like to think I am. I'm working on being sure of it. Jake started 1st grade in September. He informed his entire class on the first day that his guardian was very brave, and that his guardian's boyfriend was a policeman, which Mara heard about from his teacher and reported to me with an expression that was embarrassed and not embarrassed at the same time. "He's 6, she said. "He's accurate," I said. She looked at me for a moment with those April light eyes, and then she laughed, the real kind, all the way up, nothing tired left in it. I'd been waiting to cause that laugh since February. It was worth every misdemeanor.